It's football time. We're heading for the All-Ireland semi-finals, or should that be semi-final this weekend, Steven Poacher, because Tyrone and Kerry currently put off by 6 days. Tyrone are looking for an extra week. The GPA have come out and said that respect should be shown to the amateur status of the Tyrone players amid the uncertainty around COVID at the moment. Geez, it's not ideal timing for it, is it, coming up to an All-Ireland semi-final?
No, Shane, it's definitely not. For neither camp, probably, because obviously, teams are so professional these days that they're obviously, there's periodization when you're planning your training and you're looking at recoveries and you're looking at, timing for if the possibility arises that you win the semi-final. Like teams nowadays, Shane, at this level don't go through the sort of thing of we'll prepare for a semi-final and sure, look, if we get over Sunday, this is what we'll do next week. Teams have this all pre-prepared and pre-planned. So obviously for Kerry, it's equally as disruptive as it is for Tyrone, but obviously a lot more so for Tyrone. And I know I've seen a few things. I haven't really read much about it, but I know the sound bites that you hear from down the country in Tyrone and stuff like that. If rumors were led to be believed, that quite a number of the panel actually do have the virus or have the thing, which obviously ultimately is none of our business. How many have it or who has it, but it is a serious situation, Shane, and like I probably put it in perspective. I was thinking about this morning before I came on the show, and I was just thinking to myself, like, you look at the legislation and you look at the restrictions that are in place just to have a meal with your family, for 4 people, and the safety measures that are taking place, but yet we're demanding that 15 amateur footballers line out for the entertainment of the nation. So I think we have to be careful as well. Like, these lads are all teachers. They're doctors, they're physios, they're solicitors, they're accountants. They're just normal humans and normal people like ourselves with day jobs, with families. We don't know the vulnerable situation that Tyrone players are in at home, whether people at home are isolating, whatever it happens to be. So we'll have to respect it, Shane, and I don't think we can sort of. It's a bit like as I always say, like it's you can be the COVID police when it suits you. Like, people will give off about this or that when it comes to COVID, but then they'll do things to suit themselves. So look, we've got to respect what's going on. And me personally, if I was looking in from the outside in, like, I would be saying, look, if Tyrone need another week, give them another week, because ultimately, these lads are giving up their time to represent the county, and ultimately they're doing it for our entertainment purposes. So, and listen, Shane, I think it's important not to forget what intercounty football did for Ireland last October, November, December. Dark, dismal months. At a pressing enough time of the year for a lot of people. When the nights shut off, there's dark nights. There's nothing to look forward at the weekends, bar an odd football game on TV over in England or something like that. But you look at the scenes in Tipperary, you look at the scenes in Cavan, the passion and the joy and the memories that it gives people. So we've just got to remember that the GAA ultimately is a community-based association. It's an amateur association, and we've got to look at the bigger picture here. So yes, if they need another week, give them another week. And what's another week? The All-Ireland final goes to the 11th of September. Just something to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you look at last weekend, I was coming up the M7 to try and get to the Waterford against Limerick match. The thing gets put back half an hour. Life goes on. The first quarter was 4 points to 3. Darragh O'Donovan said in his interview afterwards that it probably did interrupt the flow of the game a little bit. Like, do we think that putting the game back a week or 2 weeks or something like that? I mean, Tyrone are still going to have an interrupted preparation for their semi-final no matter what, because they won't have their team training fully together. Kerry probably will. Then whether it's Mayo or Dublin, they get through. Yeah, they have to wait maybe another week or two longer, maybe just a week. So it really, do you think that outside of the Tyrone players, we should be making considerations for any other counties and setups here?
Well, I suppose if you go back to the old system, which is all we've ever known for over 100 years, you had to wait 4 weeks in an All-Ireland final anyway. So it's look, I would say Dublin and Mayo this weekend will be manic, it'll be frantic, it'll be passionate, it'll be hard hitting, it'll be full of everything probably. So both teams, I would say, whoever comes through, whether it's Mayo or Dublin, will be delighted with the extra week to rest tired limbs and aching bodies and the likes of it. Because look, Shane, be under no illusions, like the emotional and physical energy of these occasions and these big games take its toll on players, and they certainly do. And like, we've got to remember that these lads aren't going into a recovery centre on Monday morning, lying in the house for 4 or 5 hours. A lot of these lads are come back to work, so and they're just probably very fortunate, some of them, that they're in jobs where things are a little bit more flexible. Like quite a large amount of intercounty footballers, if you actually look through it, I would love to actually do an audit on how many are teachers, and I'm not saying in any capacity teacher lazy, because I've one myself, but I'm saying about the time flexibility. Like with teaching, obviously, I have commitments myself as a head of department. You obviously stay behind, you commit to a lot of football teams. It's all I've ever known since I was a young fella anyway, teaching, and you give up a lot of time looking after teams after school and stuff, but that is voluntary at the end of the day. It's not part of your job duties. Like, so if you want to leave school at 3 o'clock when the bell rings, you can leave school. And and I think as well, a lot of players that are teachers as well, if they get a free period, they can put their feet up, they can rest up, whatever it happens to be. They're not out in building sites digging holes and lifting heavy materials and things like that. Those days are sort of probably gone for a lot of intercounty footballers, because really and truly, and I remember speaking to a couple of lads locally here. Actually, one lad I used to coach at club level for a number of years, young Joe Murphy, and Joe's a Ballyholden lad, and Joe would have played quite a bit of National League Championship for Down at wing forward, a hell of a player. He was an under-21 panel in 2009 and left half back that lost an All-Ireland final at Cork. A phenomenal athlete, kept himself in great order. But he was jumping in a lorry at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday morning and driving to Dublin, and working hard all bloody day, in the trenches, and jumping in the lorry at maybe 4 o'clock on the south side of Dublin, looking to beat the M50 traffic, get back down the road for 6 o'clock, into the house, grab his kit bag, straight across to the Abbey for Down training. And he said it was just repeat, and just body shattered. And you wonder why he only lasted a couple of years playing at intercounty level, with the demands that was placed on county players these days. So, it is a very demanding sport. It commands a lot of commitment, a lot of dedication, a lot of sacrifice. But ultimately, we've got to remember that these lads are not getting paid. It's not their full-time job. It's an amateur sport, and we've got to ultimately respect that at the end of the day, Shane, that things will happen. Like Man United played Liverpool in a crunch game in the English Premier League, which is probably one of the most globalized sports in the whole of the world. Billion pounds of money riding on it, Shane, from sponsorship to advertising to TV rights. And that game was pulled at the last minute, for circumstances beyond the control of the two teams. And yet it had a massive knock-on effect, because ultimately it cost another club in the Premier League their place in the Champions League, with the stack up of games and the way the games went. And that is a £50 million decision or a £200 million decision. This is not a £50 million decision. This is a straightforward decision. Give it an extra week, so be it, move on, and that's it.
As you're talking about the player from Ballyholland and, the extracurricular, or the commitments that you have outside of playing sport, so your actual real life, it's common enough for players over 30 in professional soccer to be able to operate perfectly well, have great games, great 90 minutes. Look at Messi, he's 34, still one of the best in the world. A third of the captains at the Euros were over the age, were 35 or older, which I thought was an incredible stat. But something that's come out of hurling the last few weeks, and all season really. We haven't talked since a couple of weeks, but when Tipperary lost to Waterford, they had 4 players over the age of 30, 3 of whom were probably 32 and more. And it just seemed that, in a broad sense, that players who were over the age of 30 probably aren't really excelling the way they were before. Like Patrick Horgan is one of the few to have a really top season. Joe Canning maybe didn't have his greatest season. A couple of these other players also. And I just wonder, is there room for the players who are over 30 anymore? I mean, a couple of years ago, I was going on about how great the likes of Brick Walsh was at 35. And, the likes of Kevin Moran didn't even get any game time at the weekend. But Dublin won a lot of their All-Irelands by being able to bring 34 and 35-year-olds off the bench. But I do feel it's gone past the stage now of having maybe more than one guy over the age of 30, 31 starting in a team. And I wonder, for Dean Rock or a couple of more of these players, is it going to become more and more difficult?
Well, I suppose there's a number of factors, Shane, to factor into that, and it's a conversation I had a number of years ago, actually, with players that there's very few intercounty players playing over 30 now, and you see the more people retire now. Well, there's a number of things, Shane, right? Life choices. So, someone gets married, they decide to have family. A lot of young lads are obviously looking at their career at that stage, thinking themselves, maybe when they get to 29, 28, whatever it happens to be, this is not going to pay the bills ultimately, and the other thing to consider, Shane, I think, it's something that I think's caught up with Michael Murphy this year, the relentless nature of Gaelic football, right? And not just county, but club. So what we had a massive imbalance in our calendar for a number of years, and we seem to have discovered this split season, if you want to sort of call it a half sort of our split season, by accident because of COVID, not by choice. This was by accident. Be under no illusions. We've been calling for a split season for years and years. We've been calling for the regulation of calendar for years and years. I had a taste of it about a decade ago, Shane. I took our under-21s here in Down for 3 years, coached them with Neil Collins. Neil was the manager, and the hassle that we had between schools, Sigerson football, senior club football, some of them are involved in senior county. We had 2 lads in particular, and I remember doing a case study on the 2 lads, and I'll not reveal their names for confidentiality purposes. They'll hardly be listening anyway. I don't know what part of the world they're in at this stage of their lives, but these 2 lads in particular were playing something like in 4 or 5 different teams at that one particular time of the year. One of them ended up with a chronic quad injury. He never played for about 2 or 3 years. Another had chronic back problems, and this is true, Bill. And I got them to fill in a sort of a lifestyle diary just for 7 days, what they were eating, what they were drinking, how much sleep they were getting, their heart rate in the morning, their heart rate in the evening. Just simple little, some simplistic stuff that I would have taken from other sports looking in from the outside at the time. And like these lads were being just flogged like a piece, like just being flogged like a piece of meat, and demands being pulled on them. The club wants them, the county wants them, the under-21s want them, their colleges want them, we're paying your fees, and all of a sudden there's just no end to it. And they're playing county football from January right through to maybe June or July. Then they're back and they're straight into their club championships. And then they're not finished that long that the county start again in October to get ready for January. And it's just a relentless grind for 12 months of the year, Shane, and I talked about this the other day and about the periodization of training, of preparing a training schedule and a training program which allows for specific pre-season, early season, peak season, and then an off season. And an off season has to be an off season. Can't be an off season with like 10 club games fired in there. Players need downtime. They need their bodies to recover. A bit of cycling, a bit of swimming, whatever it happens to be. And I think that's where Dublin have probably gained a lot of gains over the years, Shane. And the point of view being that their club championships run off so quickly after the intercounty season. The Dublin club championship, you'd probably see it yourself. Wednesday, Saturday. It's run off in 2 or 3 weeks. Those guys don't play any league football for their clubs. No league football for their clubs at all. And in the off season, they're doing a bit of swimming and some Pilates and whatever it happens to be, and their bodies are recuperating and recovering, and then they're using the National League more or less as nearly as a stepping stone to prepare for the championship. And that's how you periodize a training program. That's how you get a team ready. Whereas a lot of our counties don't have that luxury because the players are getting pulled from all sorts of directions, and I think moving forward, Shane, we do need a defined calendar in the GA which separates the club season from the county season, because I'm singing from both hats. I've been on both sides of the camp for the guts of over 12 years now at county level and club level, and I'm more than sort of accommodating when it comes to the club players, because we've got to remember as well, 97% of the players in our association are club players. 97%. The 3% elite, as you would call it, elite status, are county players. So do we accommodate the 3% or do we accommodate the 97? And this is where I think we just need to be very, very careful moving forward, that we don't lose sight of the most important cog in the GAA, the club, the heartbeat of the association, the club. And that's for me the most important thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that front. And I hope the split season is sort of respected in the sense that as soon as a club gets knocked out, let's say you get knocked out at the start or middle of September or whatever, that the Intercounty isn't trying to pull you in for hard training and slogging almost straight away. So that would feed into like a 12-month of the year sort of thing and makes it tough for players. But actually, even just back to the point where I was making about the age, and like Michael Murphy, he turned 32 just a week ago. I wonder what his role will be next year. Like, is football changing to the way that a 32-year-old, brilliant and all as he is, might struggle through that up and down the field, or like even being a sharp inside forward, it might be tough. Looking at the Dublin bench last year, you had the likes of Michael Dara-McCauley there, Philly McManaman, Kevin McManaman, experienced players have been around. And I look at the bench that they had against Kildare in the Leinster final, it was, and these are all quality players, but Owen Merchant, Colin Pascal, Sean Bugler, Tom Lahiff, Ryan Pascal, Emmett O'Keneela, and generally it's pretty young players there. So like Dublin in the past, they're bringing on McManaman, they're bringing on Diarmuid McConney, they're bringing on, Paul Flynn, stuff like this, players that we've seen for years and years and years. Is that kind of changing? Do you think that older players are going to be pushed out of the game in the next while? Because like, are you going to give up 10 months of the year to come on for 5 minutes at the end of the game to help see it out?
It's a very valid point, Shane, and I think other sports are slightly different, right? Because if you take soccer, for example, right, and you look at players who had you talked about longevity, and you mentioned Messi's and stuff like that. And you take, for example, even like a Ryan Giggs, who started his career at 16, 17 as an out-and-out flying winger, dynamic, full of pace, full of energy. All of a sudden, then as the game evolved, the game changed. As he got older, he moved more central, and then by the end of his career, he actually nearly became, that holding midfielder at 6 who was nearly the quarterback, who was dictating things. The problem in Gaelic football is the game has got so dynamic, so fast. There is so much speed involved in the way the game has moved on, and it's very hard to accommodate that sort of a role for a player now. Like, gone are the days where you could probably play, a player who is slowed down, and maybe sit him at 6, let him drop off, as I call the armchair role. Like, let him sit in the armchair role, let him dictate things, let him be that sort of type of quarterback type player. Like, those days are probably gone, because, like, I was chatting to a group last night. Actually, a friend of mine asked me to come down and take a session from his club, and I went down and I was saying that, like, the game is just so much about pace now. If you don't have pace in your team, like, you're already at a disadvantage. And I think it's so evident, like, that even the physicality, the condition of the players now, Shane, like, I look at this Mayo team this weekend, the difference physically from last December's All-Ireland final and some of those players, like, maybe it's just a visual thing. I don't know. Maybe the jerseys have got tighter. I'm not sure. But, like, Oisin Mullen, Ryan O'Donoghue, these lads have put on serious.
Tommy Conroy is another perfect example. A machine now.
Absolutely. And that's what I think is that's where I think the game is changing. These younger lads, Shane, are just becoming fitter and faster and more mobile, and it's becoming harder for older players then to adapt. But listen, look, a player like Michael Murphy, like, of course, there's always a role for him in any team, and whether that is, the role that he currently plays as nearly a general in chief and roaming about and slipping inside for 10 minutes, coming out the field for 10 minutes, whatever it happens to be. Because the way the game's played now, anyway, if you're inside for 10 minutes, you're probably more likely going to get more of a rest than you are in the war zone in the middle third. So, but look, it's about how you manage players too, Shane, and, like, older players need managed as well. And I'm sure, those management teams aren't silly, and I'm sure the likes of Michael Murphy doesn't be running up hills and mountains in December and January. Like, I would say he's been well rested. Like, so it's just about managing that type of player who's at that particular age. But you're right, it's a very hard sell for players too, Shane. Like, to say to a player, even at club level, to convince older players, and, like, I would have had this experience myself at club level, convincing older players to hang around, to bring their experience to training, but also to bring their experience, as you say, coming off the bench and making a difference. I don't want to do that. I want to play. If I can give it up 3 nights a week, I don't want to sit on the bench for 40 minutes. I want to play. So it's a very hard sell. Is it an easy sell when you're winning All Irelands every year or winning club championships every year? Of course it is. Of course it is. And even take my own county here and down in Kilcoo, and a large proportion and a large part of their squad is backbone by experience. The likes of Chuck Brannigan, Conor Lavery, Sean O'Hanlon, Dominic McAvoy, Niall McAvoy. Those lads are all at the tail end of their 30s. But they're going to hang around because they know 99 times out of 100 they're going to win a club championship. So do I give up my time to win a club championship, or do I give up my time to keep a team in Division 1 by playing 20 minutes? No thanks. But I will have a piece of this. So that's easy for Dublin to sell it to those players. Much easier than a county like Fermanagh or Leitrim or Carlow or something who maybe, the greatest achievement that they're going to get is getting out of the division, or progressing up the leagues, and that could be gone after the first 3 games of the league. So it's an easier sell at the highest level, Shane. No doubt.
And to be honest, like, it's what you're saying is ringing true for me. A couple of years ago, at the age of 35, we're pushing for the All-Ireland club title with Coola, and you're training as hard as possible just in the hope that you get a taste of the action, going for the biggest title that you can possibly go for. So that absolutely rings true for me. I want to jump back to the Ulster football final. We haven't been speaking since then. To me, Tyrone, obviously they won 16 points to 15. But the thing that stood out to me is just the battle of Niall Morgan and Rory Beggan. It probably did to most. But sure, I suppose, as you were saying to me afterwards in a text, Mark Reid, the former down goalie, he's been at that for like a couple of years anyway. It's not a new thing, but it did feel like it was an escalation in terms of goalkeepers coming out the field.
Yeah. The Mark Reid story is a funny one because I actually took Bransford last year, but the year before I wasn't involved, and I think they were short of outfield players one night. That many injuries, and they went down to Burn, and he decided to play in the middle of the field, and I think he scored 2 or 3 points. So when I get wind of this, I thought, Jesus, this boy could maybe do something here. He actually scored a point against Kilcoo in a league game actually last year. By coming out, they went up. I think they were winning like 11-9 or something, or 10-9 towards the end of the game, and they do what they do best, and they everyone back inside their 45, defending very deep. And you're just looking to bring an extra man out to try and stretch that a little bit, and maybe create a bit of panic, and give yourself that little bit of an outball or overload. I think, Shane, it's very important though that it's great to see, and it's how the roles evolving. But Rory Beggan and Niall Morgan aren't stupid either. And I think what you'll probably find this year in club games in particular is you'll get this kamikaze stuff now where the keeper will want to come out all the time. Maybe a man from Columbia, I can't remember his name, the Reggie boy, I can't remember him. He used to come out like a head kiss and the halfway line and lose the ball. And I think it's important to remember that pressure creates panic. So if your goalkeeper's coming out all the time, it just takes one mistake, Shane, for panic just to set in and evolve. And I think even towards the end of the Monaghan Tyrone game, I even felt at times it got a little bit frantic and a little bit manic. It's just even the Bagan having to chase back and make that tackle, like it was class to see, and it was exciting as a neutral. But I'm sure along the line, both camps were like, "What is going on here?" So, like I remember, go back years when goalkeepers used to come up for corners, and like Peter Schmeichel came up for United and scored an equaliser one night, the 90th minute. Your man from Liverpool last year, Allison, scored a header to win the game or something, and like they're obscure moments, like, and they're fascinating. But it's interesting because I had this conversation last week, and I was doing a little piece on it for the coaching article I have, and like I was talking about the evolution of a goalkeeper, and I was saying, like, even in soccer now, and I remember years ago, and this is a brilliant story. I remember years ago, a young lad in our school going over to West Brom. A young lad, actually, I tell you who it was Shane Harrison from Glasgow. He'd be Conor Harrison's younger brother who would have played for Down. And Shane was a fantastic goalkeeper, like brilliant goalkeeper. We used to have the wee colour-coded cone system in school. So Shane had 3 cones. He had a yellow cone, a red cone, and a green cone. Just kept it simple for the lads. So a red cone, he was going left. A green cone, he was going in the middle. And a yellow cone, he was going right, whatever it happened to be. So if you're a young lad and you were colourblind, you were in big trouble for the kick-out. Like, But Shane went over to West Brom at the time. And I remember him coming back. He spent a week over there. And one of his greatest assets, Shane, was he had this booming kick out. For Gaelic, he had a booming kick out, and kick out strategies weren't really in at that stage. Like you're talking about, Jesus, they got some maybe 12, 13 years ago. But I remember Shane coming back and asking him about his experience, and he says, like, no, like they don't want you to kick the ball out. They just want you to roll it out to the corner or the full back or whatever, or just tap it out to the centre half. And if you watch soccer now, like the goalkeeper nearly has to be, Shane, as equally good with his feet as he is with his hands. And that's the way Gaelic is becoming, that your goalkeeper now nearly has to play that sevens type role. Like I used to go to Kilmacud every year, loved it. Took the lads up, took the kingdom up, started taking Enrake up about, well, Enrake were always going up, but I was the manager around about 2009, I think, and it was my first experience of Kilmacud, and I fell in love with it for about 5 or 6 years. For the tournament now, it's sad because I think the tournament has sort of fizzled out now. It's a non-event really nowadays, but it used to be a brilliant event, like. But the goalkeeper used to get the player of the tournament quite regularly because he was an outfield player who was coming out. He was dictating things. He was getting on the end of scores. He was arriving late. He was very hard to mark, and that's something that I think will happen in Gaelic football further on down the line until some rule change comes in that goalkeepers aren't allowed to cross their 21 or something nonsense like that, or they'll probably put some rule in because it doesn't suit with the traditionalists. Like, but look, I think it's really innovative. I think it's really fun to watch. But again, it's probably picking and choosing the moment, Shane, of when to do it and when not to do it.
Yeah, because Rory Beggan did speak with Tomás O'Shea on his podcast there this week, and he was talking about. He said Niall Morgan was doing the same thing in the first half, and he said what he was trying to do was just come out and cause a bit of disruption. And he said he started off. I think he said he went out to, I suppose, left wing back more or less, where that sort of an area to try and get under a few kickouts, but they were all going the other side, and he decided, okay, I'll head over this other side. And then when that kick out went over him, and it was it Matty Donnelly who was going through on goals and he turned him over, or was it McKenna?
Flick on. Conor McKenna got a great sort of Aussie rules flick, and Donnelly then ran onto it, like, yeah.
Yeah, and he was just like, well, he was like, I was probably the freshest player on the field because, you know, he's obviously standing in goals for most of the time. So he said he just went here and after him. And he was like, I think, to be fair, I probably fouled him, you know, when he tugged him back. And he said he wouldn't have done the flick up. He didn't realise that Darren McCurry was there beside him. But it was one of the most dramatic things ever. And I think, like, kids will watching on at that. You know, the last few years, sometimes Gaelic football is unbelievable, but there's been a lot of drab games too. But any kid watching on there will think, geez, I'd love to be like Niall Morgan or like Rory Beggan.
No, it's going to inspire a generation, Shane, and that's what I said actually last week in my article. Like I said, number 1 is the new number 11, you know, and I don't mean that as in a playmaker type thing. I mean with the aura of the jersey. You know, years ago, everybody wanted to wear number 11. That was the jersey. That was the nice number. That was the one you wanted, you know, and there's a sort of an aura about wearing that jersey, or 8 or 9 had an aura about it. Like nobody wanted to wear 7 or 5 or 4 or 10. You know, everybody wanted to wear 9 or 11 or 14, and 1 is like that now. You know, it's no, years ago it was like, look, who's last picked there in school, right, you're in nets, you know, and that's now it's like I want to be Niall Morgan, I want to be Rory Beggan. And I think we probably have to go back, Shane, to Cluxton, who has probably kickstarted this whole thing. He's made goalkeeping sexy again. He's, you know, he's just reinvented the kick out, like even to the point where it's been rebranded, you know, possession restarts. You know, I think Dublin were the first to rebrand this, that this is a restart. And I can see the theory behind it. It's not just a kick out anymore. It's you're restarting the game and it's a possession for you. So what do you want to ultimately do? You want to ultimately keep possession of your own restart, you know, and it's like a free kick on the halfway line. What do? Do you just get the ball and just hit it as high and as hard and as long as you can? It's the same process as a kick out. No, you want to work it short. You want to keep possession. You want to try and create a scoring opportunity from it. And even that the kick out that Beggan chased back on, like that would have been one of the best goals scored because it was a boomer over the top from Morgan. It was an Aussie rule style leap from Conor McKenna, the flick on to Donnelly. It was Donegal 2014 against Dublin, where they absolutely tore Dublin to pieces tactically that day, and it was probably the day that turned the ship for the Dubs because they realised, look, if we're going to win All Irelands, we just can't go out and play off the cuff, free flow and stuff. Like we've got to have some form of defensive structure and organisation. And I think Dublin's philosophy and mantra after that game, and particularly Jim Gavin's, changed massively, you know, because that was the last time, ironically, that any team scored 3 goals against Dublin in the championship.
So do you think that that many counties will be looking at converting outfield players to goalkeeper, or is the skill of the kick out such that very few could actually do it? And because I'm wondering, like, at the moment, Stephen Cluxton, we'll just assume he's retired. God knows what the actual real story is. But I don't know if he could necessarily do that role of coming out. Now, he plays centre-back for Parnells, so maybe I'm wrong in him there. But do you think that that many counties will say, do you know what, we're going to throw a dynamic player who's of the Morgan/Beggan type physique and skill set, and they can probably score, as comfortable carrying the ball into the opposition half of the field? Or just the kickouts are too difficult for an outfield player to do it?
Well, I'll tell you the God's honest truth. Like, I had this discussion with James McCartan last year. The two of us used to fight about this all the time. Like I used to say, look, there's 35 kickouts in a game. There might be only one shot to save. So who are we better off in nets with? An outfield player who can ping a ball 60 yards onto the, you know, sixpence, or are you better with a really good shot stopper who struggles with his kickout? So I think the biggest sort of conundrum in that, Shane, or the biggest variable in that is, can they kick the ball? You know, and I know that Downer 21s played Charlie Smith in goals this year when they won the Ulster 20 title. And obviously from watching a lot of Down club football, I would know that Charlie plays midfield for his club, Mayo Bridge. Still a young lad, still a lot to learn, obviously, out the field, but a phenomenal place kicker. So the way they probably looked at it was simple. Like, look, I'd say Marty Clark would have a big say in this as well, because Marty obviously was a big advocate of your goalkeeper should be able to dictate the switch of play. He should be able to come out and present himself for a ball and stuff like that. So, like, it was no surprise to see him in goals. And the fact of the matter is, if you're a good place kicker from free kicks, then you're bound to be a good place kicker off the ground from kickouts, you know, because you can place a ball. That's what place kicking is. It's about being able to place a ball between the sticks. So I think what you could probably find, Shane, is without questionable a really good free taker who is maybe, and this maybe sounds disrespectful, but if you think down the years, like, really good free takers, where some of them were seen as passengers in a lot of teams. You know, like, what does he do? All he does is hit frees. But yes, but that's a vital ingredient in any successful team. So what you'll probably find is successful place kickers might be sort of cohorted into, look, we have a new role for you, and this could be a fantastic role for you, you know. So it's unquestionably, Shane, unquestionably, and there's a lot of young lads in our own county here who I've seen in the last number of years who could really fill that role, you know, and come out and play that sort of sweeper role and get involved in the play. Really and truly, like, how many shots on goal are you going to save in a game? Like, there's going to be, what, 2 or 3, you know, and the percentages of you saving a one-on-one from someone coming running through at you with the ball in their hands is pretty slim anyway. So, you know, and if you can't catch a ball here, or you can't catch a ball here, dropping under the crossbar, you shouldn't really be playing Gaelic football at the highest level then, you know. So
it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Just moving on then to well, we'll probably talk Tyrone and Kerry a little bit more next week, but we'll move on to Mayo against Dublin. You couldn't really, since the tournament, the millennium, it has to be. I'd even put it ahead of Tyrone and Kerry. Obviously, during the noughties, their clashes were huge, and maybe even some of the Ulster rivalries that were going on, Armagh, Tyrone, and all that. I think Mayo and Dublin has to be the number one in terms of rivalries. Some of the atmosphere at some of those games around 2012, 2015, 2016, you know, the games that were going to replays and everything, all Ireland semi-finals and finals, it's just spectacular stuff, and it's kind of like a primal atmosphere. I just think they're brilliant games.
Phenomenal, Shane, and I was lucky enough to get to 4 or 5 of them, I think. I didn't go to any of the replays. I think there was 2 replays, was there?
Yeah, there was a semi-final one year and a final then the following year, like 14, 15, 16.
I remember being at some of them, and they were just, as you say, they were enthralling. They were just hugely enthralling. As you say, the passion, the emotion, the game's going right down the stretch. It had everything, the drama, and even the small things like, you know, Lee Keegan throwing the GPS at Rock. Like, those are moments that will never be forgotten, you know, and iconic moments. And I remember 2013 in particular when Dublin beat them. I think it was 2013. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, in the final.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
I remember at the game, and a friend of mine who had come home from England, and I got him a ticket, and his mother actually is originally from Mayo, and he was just mad to go to the game, and we went down, and he just couldn't believe the last 5 minutes how, like, Dublin were literally just riding on Mayo's backs, like just cynically dragging them down, fouling and systematically stopping them, and it was so frustrating probably for Mayo supporters to see it at the time. But Shane, they have been phenomenal games, and even last year's final, like, that first half performance from Mayo was something else. Like, it was outstanding, and complete dominance on their own kick out, complete dominance on Cluxon's kick out, and still went in level at half time, I think, or was it level? I think 2-6-12 or something. Can't mind the score, but I think it was level, and you're shaking your head in disbelief, going, "How is this game all square?" You know, it was unbelievable. But listen, look, they've been great encounters, Shane, unquestionably brilliant encounters, and you know, Dublin Kerry obviously is a rivalry that goes back, you know, years and years and years. You know, obviously historically, but without a shadow of a doubt, the last decade will undoubtedly be remembered for these battles, like, unquestionably.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Mayo. I have the match programme from last year's All-Ireland final. I think Dean Rock scored a goal after something like 13 seconds. Con O'Callaghan got one not too long later. And I'm looking, like, there's 6 retirees for Mayo over the winter. Now, not all of them are starting, or probably even close to all starting. But I'm looking at some of these Dublin forwards that, you know, Cillian O'Connor, he's obviously out injured. Aidan O'Shea didn't score in the game. Tommy Conroy didn't score in the game. Diarmuid O'Connor didn't score. Kevin McLaughlin. So of the 6 forwards that were there, Ryan O'Donoghue is the only one coming into this clash that actually even scored in the semi-final last year. Like, can we say too much about how Mayo have evolved in that time? Was the league enough to tell us anything? Was the Connacht Championship enough? And obviously you're with Roscommon in the Connacht Football Championship. You didn't come up against them, but I'm sure you would have been keeping a very close eye. So, like, what can we say about Mayo? Is there much of a difference between now and last year?
Well, I suppose they went to Division 2 this year, and they got the show back on the road pretty quickly, Shane, with victories, you know, over Down, over Westmeath, over Meath, and then ultimately over Clare to get promoted. So to carry 4 wins in a row into any championship is obviously, you know, hugely encouraging for them. You know, facile victories obviously over Leitrim and Sligo at the time, and you know, they obviously wouldn't have learned anything from them. I think even in the Leitrim game, I think even game was live on TV. I think you could even see the pictures after that they were doing a training session on the pitch after, like, you know, and like, I suppose the only real test that they probably have had this year was Galway in the Connacht final in the first half. They sort of looked at 6s and 7s. Shane Walsh was exceptional in that first half. Sort of footballer that he is, he can turn it on, and he's a top class player. Conroy was excellent in the middle, but I think it was a couple of little subtle changes at half time where they're nullified Walsh and Conroy. They really shut those two down. That probably would have been highlighted and red flagged at half time. They were shut down, and obviously all of a sudden, they got into their running game, and they're a powerful team at running with the ball. Shane, they've got some really, really strong athletes. I touched on it earlier in the show when we're chatting. Physicality, the athleticism of them. They've been on the road a long time. Some of them, there's obviously a drive and desire to ultimately get over the line because they've been so close for so often. But it's the biggest question now is obviously going to be answered at the weekend. And this is the mad thing about this year. It wouldn't surprise me if Mayo beat Dublin, honestly, because of the way Dublin have, seemed to have sort of just stagnated a little bit this year. It wouldn't be an ultimate surprise, and at the same time, it wouldn't be a surprise if Mayo were beating the final. And that's the sad thing, that they could dethrone Dublin for the first time and yet still lose to Kerry or Tyrone, and that's the stark reality of the situation. Shane, I think obviously the Dubs are the most experienced of the 4 teams left. For me, I think I read a piece, from Aidan O'Rourke a number of weeks ago, where he talked about a lot of teams are playing a lot more offensive-based stuff. Basketball coaches are being brought into a lot of teams to try and stretch the attack. You look at Donegal's width in their attack and coming off the sidelines and clearing the D and all this fancy stuff and V-cuts and backdoor cuts and all the terminologies there. It's there in evidence. But ultimately, the team who are most defensively organised and well set up will ultimately probably be the team that comes out on top. And again, if you look at the last 4, who is that? It has to be Dublin. So it's just a question of whether Dublin have come back a little bit, or have they been just tiddling along and doing enough? Like Shane, people questioned Dublin the last day. They still scored 20 points, not 20. They still won the game quite comfortably without really having to do an awful lot, in the final. So
it was their lowest winning margin in the Leinster final since 2013. They won by 8 points, as you said, and even that goal for Kildare, the game was long gone. It was 16 points at that stage. There was no hope turning it around at all. But I don't know. There's something about this Dublin team that they're not quite putting teams away. I mean, second half against Kerry in the league, not great. Meath took over the second half. I just wonder, what do Mayo have to do differently? Is there something tactically they have to do differently? Colm Nally, the Meath coach, he had a video up earlier, and it was, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but the way that Mayo spread out, and you've talked about Dublin spread out and they hugged the touchlines. And the video he showed, it was from the behind the goals camera looking down on the pitch, and they were actually, some of the Dublin players were actually standing out over the sideline, just getting that extra yard again. Do Mayo do that the same way? Do Dublin do it better? What can Mayo do about that? Should you follow the player all the way out to the sideline, or should you say, Joe, what, have your 10 yards there and I'll only bother engaging you when you come back in?
Well, for me, Shane, there's a number of things there. Dublin obviously do this because the large majority of teams who set up against Dublin set up quite defensively. They defend narrow, they defend with numbers. They play +1, maybe possibly +2 sometimes. So Dublin introduced this sort of basketball type strategy of what you would call 1 in and 4 out. So in basketball, it's called 1 in, 4 out. And what that means is 1 in the key and 4 out. But the 4 outside are spread around the basketball court and nearly in a square. Okay, hugging the sidelines, hugging the touchlines. And the one in the key rotates quite regularly because you're only allowed in the key in basketball for a certain amount of time. And these are obviously very, very clear basketball type traits. There's also another video Colm done actually from that All-Ireland final last year, which shows another basketball trait. 3 men bunching inside. Paddy Small goes to make a run across. I think it's Dean Rock just comes discreetly in, just screens his man, and all of a sudden, bang, he just breaks into space. All he needs is 5 or 10 yards of space, collects the ball on the edge of the D, turns and pops it over the bar. And one thing what Dublin will probably expect Mayo to do, and this is something why I think Dublin do this probably more often maybe against Mayo, is what they'll expect with Mayo is a full-on man-to-man press, because that's all Mayo have ever done against Dublin. That's, for some reason, everyone says that's the only way you're going to beat them. You have to go at them. You have to go man-to-man. Well, it hasn't worked yet, so we'll see at the weekend if it's going to work again. But the danger of pressing so high, so hard in that system is that Dublin are so cute, they're so well versed, they're so well drilled, Shane, when it comes to these set moves, as you would call them, set plays. You know, it's nearly, and it's an awful lot of it is player orchestrated. An awful lot of it is really good coaching. It's playing together for a long time, and you can see very clearly, Shane, the way they play is that it's even in the Leinster final, I picked up something like there must be a huge amount of player-led stuff behind the scenes, because even Potter Andrews talked about when they're preparing for opposition, they get together and their forwards, defenders, they analyse the opposition, the feedback to management, etc., right? And obviously, a lot of Dublin players, when they retire, they come out and tell people stuff a bit more than what they do when they're within the camp, which is understandable. But if you look in the Leinster final, there was a moment of sort of wee bit of madness, wee bit of frantic nature. The game ebbed and flowed for a couple of minutes. There were never really in any danger. Davy Byrne comes out, the hand goes up. And once the hand goes up, he's the hand up and he's bouncing the ball solo on the spot. That's their shutdown mode, right? Bang. Nothing happens 5 minutes here. Keep possession. Get high and wide. Get width on both sides. Let's move this ball about. Make Kildare chase for 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll just wear them down eventually. You know, and that's my only thought, Shane, in the point of view being that you can go manic man to man, you can press them everywhere, but I just feel sometimes it's just squealing out for a team who can match them physically, who can match them athletically, just to manage the game the same way they manage it. You know, and who cares if it's attritional to watch? Who cares if people are giving off about it? At the end of the day, that's what they're doing ultimately to get over the line. And, you know, hopefully, I think, you know, we'll see a really, really good game on Saturday. But, you know, they're going to be hard beats, Shane. There's no point in telling any, like, they're going to be hard beats.
If you jump back to the All-Ireland last year, Dublin did that. They killed the game in the last few minutes. There was, even though there wasn't that much between the two teams on the scoreline, it just felt like there's absolutely zero chance of turning it over. Huh?
I'm going to make a point. I'm going to make a point to you here now, right? So in the first half of the All-Ireland final last year, I actually had these stats wrote down. I don't have my diary here in front of me because I was analysing the final last year after for I think for yourself actually. We were doing a wee piece, but I looked at the stats last year, and the longest bout of possession in the first half of the All-Ireland final last year. So what I mean by the longest bout of possession, when a team gets the ball and before it's given away or shot, the longest bout of possession was something really low, like 28 seconds or 31 seconds, right? Dublin got a man black card in the stroke of half time, so they came out in the second half of 14 men. They had 3 spells in the first 8 minutes of the second half that all lasted for longer than 1 minute in possession. There was one spell in particular that lasted for 90 seconds, and it was kicked back to Cluxton twice. You know, if a lot of other teams kicked the ball back to the goalkeeper, they'd be pillified. Look at that there. It's negative. It's defensive. But Dublin's hailed as great game management, you know, and that's something that you know, people who are coaching and people who have an analytical eye for the game, they'll see those things and they'll realise there is moments in the game where you need to just sting it, you know, take the sting out, kill the game, and then there's moments where you can go after it and really go frantic. But Dublin are just seem to be, Shane, just so well versed in when to go mad and when to just settle, you know. And again, that does not just come from the sideline, Shane, because it's actually even harder this last couple of years to get messages onto the pitch because there's no Mayor Fonius going onto the pitch. There's no instructions coming in. Water breaks, obviously you're not a big fan of them. They've obviously become, I don't even call them water breaks anymore. They're tactical timeouts. That's what they are. Like, they've become tactical timeouts. The boards are out. The figures are being moved about. They're in groups, the forwards, defenders, feedback quick. And it's not a minute. They're out there sometimes for 3 minutes. Like, you know, it's a mini half. Like, and if we're going to do that, we might as well just make it official and just say, right, 4 halves of 15 minutes. And, you know, after 15 minutes, you have 2 minutes to feed back to your players or something, because at the minute it's become a joke, the water breaks. Complete joke.
There's a couple of comments coming in, questions for you, Stephen. I'll come to them in a second, but I'm just looking at the Connacht final, which was on in Croke Park, which is no bad thing for Mayo coming into this game. And I'm just noting again there that you know, Rob Henley is back in the goals. Obviously, David Clark is no longer part of the panel. He played the final last year. Henley, you know, has lots of very good traits, but has had a couple of tough days against Dublin in the past. So I wonder, like, is there going to be a squeeze put on him? How is he going to react? We've got the crowd back in as well. That's another factor. And then like Evan Comerford, this is probably going to be the first game where he's really, truly tested. And like, do you expect either of these two goalkeepers, as well as that, to try and pull a begging Niall Morgan in this game?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Because
No?
it's too, I just think it's too high stakes, it's too high risk. I don't think
Well,
you'll see
okay,
either.
just to jump back in again, let's say Dublin do this thing that they did in the last 10 minutes against both Meath and Kildare of killing the ball and holding on to it for 3 or 4 minutes, and you need a score. At that stage, will they say, Joe, what, let's just go for broke, Henley, you're outfield?
I don't know, Shane. I don't know, because I haven't seen it before from either side, really. And, I think, but you asked the question initially about the press and what you're going to find on Saturday. And I've said this to so many club teams or club players that I take a couple of sessions here and there, and you're saying to them, they're talking about press. People ask you questions about press and kickouts. Just watch these two teams on Saturday, because they're two of the best in the business of doing it. And if you think of Kerry and the way they've evolved their press, and you look at Tyrone against Donegal, Tyrone went a man up against Donegal. So when most teams go a man up, what they're thinking is, who's our spur man? What are we doing? But what they actually done in the second half was they actually put their spur man on one side of the halfway line and their goalkeeper on the other half of the halfway line. And Sean Patton had zero outballs. So he had 6 forwards set up, 2 banks of 3, and then you had your 2 spur in the running channels. And it was a joy to watch, because tactically it was very, very cute. It was brave, it was bold, and it ultimately won Tyrone the game, because one of Sean Patton's greatest strengths is his ability to put the ball down and get it away quick and long, and actually over the cordon before teams could even get set or organised. He's brilliant in that long trajectory into the space on the left, particularly on the left-hand side of the game. And Tyrone put their spur man in there on their goalkeeper on this side. But on Saturday, what you'll see Dublin's 44, 3 banks of 4, incessant press. As soon as that ball's in mid-air, they'll swamp the breaks. They're brilliant at break ball because they're hungry, they're aggressive, they're all strong physically, and they're just congregating in that break ball because they've got the zonal press on. They more than likely, 9 times out of 10, have the overload in that area. And the far side then's filtering around the back just to provide the safety net. And Mayo, again, I've always admired their press. They've been very aggressive. They go after kickouts. They go after every kickout. And maybe ultimately, now and again, maybe during the game from open play, maybe they should drop off the odd one and give themselves that breather on Saturday. I don't know. But when they're looking at Emmet Comerford in comparison to Cluxton, they're probably thinking, well, look, we did dismantle Cluxton in the first half of the All-Ireland final last year. We took nearly 50% of his restarts off him. If we can take 50% off Comerford, how will he react psychologically, not having been in the big environment? But from speaking to a couple of the lads in DCU who played with Comerford, they said he's class. Like, he's absolutely class. And I haven't really seen the kid playing that much, Shane. I can't really make a comment, but like, they just said, look, put a ball down, you move, I'll find you. And I think that was a lot of Cluxton's mantra as well. You move and I'll find you. It was no real, like, you could have watched, I remember watching Dublin kickouts like years ago, like for maybe fucking an hour, and there's no real patterns. It's just plays you see nearly, and and there's subtle movements. There's a little bit of screening going on out the field, but you can see certain patterns in teams' kickouts. Like, you can see a team maybe find a bunch in the middle, break out, and maybe send one down the middle to a centre half forward or something for a flick on, or you can see the wee narrow bunch and break into the space. You can see, you can nearly suss a couple of kickouts out of an opposition team, but they just seem to be just so comfortable and confident in the fact that once that number 1 man sits the ball down, he'll find us if we move. And that's it. You've got so much movement, it's hard to stop.
Couple of questions in. So, hi lads, great show. What do you think can be done to stem the basketball influence on football? Already 4 quarters, hand pass galore. Thinking 2 points for a hand pass goal to the net. What are your thoughts?
2 points for a what, sorry?
I presume he means a palmed goal into the net. 2 points for that instead of 3.
I call them, to the kids in school, I call them 6-pointers. I always said, and if you palm one into the net on the opposition, it's worth 6 point sizes, because it's psychologically damaging when you walk the ball into the net on someone, and I always say the 6-pointer, if you're through in goal, call the 6-pointer. If you're through and you're getting the keeper man inside you, flick it across and palm it in, because they're absolutely, they're class. They take the sting out of anyone, Shane. When you're walking the ball into the net, it just kills the opposition.
But like, they are a bit ugly. It's called Gaelic football. You should have to kick it once. In
the what, sorry, the palm goals?
Yeah, the palmed goals. I mean, obviously, look, coaches don't care whether it's entertaining or not, but just in terms of the quality of the sport, it's called Gaelic football. Surely you should have to kick the ball at some stage to get it into the net.
Yeah, well, listen, that's perfectly true. That's perfectly true. But we're dabbling with that many rules at the minute. You're throwing on one in there, it'll not make much difference.
Yeah.
No, the mark rule, I think Shane has sort of. I think it's actually been a detrimental effect because, like, Daniel Flynn called a ball on Sunday and he sort of called the mark, but he didn't really want to call the mark because a split second later he had a runner coming off the shoulder who had actually broke through for a goal chance. You know, and I think we're denying some goal chances with the mark rule. I really do. Like, you know, I really do.
We're losing one-on-one contests because players are doing that instead of turning and going at their man. That's a shame. Yeah. Another question in for you here, Stephen. Who's the best player you've managed at school level and where are they now? Might be a tough one off the top of your head.
Jesus, it's a quick one there. School level, best player. Well, the best player in well, one of the most promising players that I had through Kilkeels and Columban's at the time. Jeez, I've had so many of them. So many really, really good footballers who went on to play for Down. I suppose, like, you know, the likes of Conor Poland there, who would have captained the school to an All-Ireland title and Ulster title, and Conor would have been at 16. Conor was a sensational footballer, you know, an absolutely sensational footballer, younger brother of Mark, and massive expectation levels of him at that age. But what happened actually was he actually was full forward in the Down team in 09 that played in an All-Ireland final, under 21 final, and he was only, I think the kid was only 18 at the time. He was 3 years too young for the grade. But Pete McGrath rated him that highly. He played him in full forward in that team. He was superb. Like, he might have scored the winning goal in the Ulster final that year against Armagh. I'm not sure. I need to double check that. But Conor actually went to London to work. Work took him away, and he didn't play at the highest level for a large number of times, and a few injury issues and stuff like that. But he came back and played a bit of football for Down there recently and around the middle of the field. But listen, just Conor was exceptional. But there's just so many to name. You know, but he was an exceptional footballer. Really, really was.
So just to come back to Dublin Mayo this weekend, like, how does Aidan O'Shea get himself into this game? He's found it very difficult in these particular matches.
I think it's hard time, Shane. I think Aidan O'Shea is a brilliant footballer. Another player who's been around a long, long time. I remember going out to watch a Sigerson Cup game. Jesus, it must be a long time ago. What age is Aidan now? He must be, what, 30 now, is he?
He's 30, 31, yeah. He's there since 2008 or 9. I remember he was the answer himself and Barry Moran were playing in full forward line around 2009, and they were the answer to the Twin Towers of Tommy Walsh and Kieran Donaghy with Kerry.
Yeah, well, I remember it must be over 10 years ago, and I went out to watch a Sigerson game in Mayo Bridge. I think he played for, correct me if I'm wrong, did he play for one of the Dublin sides, DIT maybe?
I think so, yeah.
Well, I think DIT were playing University of Ulster Georgetown. I think they were playing Georgetown in Mayo Bridge in a Ryan Cup game in the depths of the winter. And sure, you would have watched two flies going up the wall in the winter when there was no Gaelic on. So I went out to watch the game in Mayo Bridge, and I remember saying, "Who's that there?" And now wet night, and somebody says, "Young boy from Mayo, Aidan O'Shea." Jesus, some footballer there, like, you know, and he was lovely left foot. He could strike a ball. He's actually brilliant at striking a ball. You know, that sort of a low trajectory, Shane, outside of the foot, and really, really comfortable with that. And look, he's obviously going to be well marshalled. He's always well marshalled. He takes a lot of physical abuse as well. Probably a lot of verbal abuse too, I'm sure. There's no angels out there on Saturday either, let me tell you. But so look, there's unquestionably a match-winning performance from him, but I do feel sometimes people are very, very quick to hail abuse at him, because I think he's a really, really good footballer. Really good footballer.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. But just in these Dublin games, he has kind of struggled to get into some of them, and they struggle to find the right role for him. So, you know, this could be the game where he steps up here. But in the heat of the hunt...
Shane, it wasn't that long ago that Mayo, I think Tony Buckney met him in there at the time, Mayo played him full back to Mark Kieran Donaghy. Full back. Like, there's not too many footballers who go from full forward to centre half forward to midfield to full back. You know, a man who played in the forward line all his life, and he did okay that day. He broke even in Big Donaghy that day, because I was at the game.
He definitely did. Because that was the thing that had killed Mayo against Kerry for a few years. So you know, as much as people kind of, in some ways, ridiculed it, I thought that's brilliant from Stephen Rochford, because only, like, a lot of managers stay losing the same way. Why go out and lose the same way? And actually, which brings us to this, like, are Mayo going to go and lose the same way? You talked about going mano a mano and all that kind of stuff. Would it be a shock to you to see Mayo try something different and just say, do you know what, we're going to throw everyone behind the ball and try and counter you?
No, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be a shock, I don't think, because I think, obviously they've obviously looked at where they went well last year. They got a lot of joy off Dublin's kickouts. I think they're going to go after Dublin's kickouts. I really do. I think that would be, for me, that's probably one of the most fascinating battles of the whole game is how Comerford will respond to the press and the pressure that's going to be on, because they are relentless with it, and they were in the first half last year. But I think one of the biggest things, Shane, will probably be a concentration thing, particularly early in the game. They've conceded early to Dublin. They've chased a lot of games against Dublin. Wouldn't it be interesting on Saturday to see Mayo get that start and maybe race into a 3 or 4 point lead and see how Dublin would react by chasing the game? And that, for me, would be the most interesting thing. I think for Mayo to get over the line on Saturday, I think that's probably something that they'll be really targeting, is probably a quick start and get in front early and stay in front.
Yeah, I think most people, well, anyone who's going for Dublin probably thinks that Brian Fenton will have a bigger game in this match, that maybe John Small back from injury now, that he'll step up. The spine of the team, where Con O'Callaghan is there and Kieran Kilkenny, that they'll be the reasons that Dublin will get across the line. But Mayo have, had heartache so many times, but I actually think Mayo are going to come through this game. I know they're without Cillian O'Connor, such a reliable free taker for the most part for Mayo, but I do like what I'm seeing from Mayo. I don't think that they'll do it and somehow do it the easy way. If they do it, I think they'll somehow find the hard way. But I just about go for Mayo to win what will probably be another war. So which way are you leaning?
I'm going to go with a draw.
A draw? An extra time and penalties.
And a replay the following week, and then Tyrone and Kerry's on, so everybody's happy, and there's no everybody's no. I think it'll go down the line. It'll go down the stretch, Shane. I think it will go down the stretch. I think it'll be very, very tight. I think it'll be tense, and I just have a funny feeling that this Dublin team are probably just have another little kick just to say, look, we haven't gone away, and that's where I think will be the difference in the end,
Okay, well, brilliant stuff, Stephen, as ever. Thanks very much, and we'll be chatting to you again soon.
Thanks, Shane. Gentlemen, thank you.